So look, thanks everyone. We're talking about wellness in the workplace. And look, I can sum up in a few short words the whole premise of our message tonight. Essentially, before we get into the details, do you want to bring that one up, Kirsten? Essentially, with many businesses, their biggest asset is often people. Within that asset class, some of the biggest concerns globally around the challenges to do with managing that resource are to do with things like lost productivity, things like stress, chronic disease, as you'll see, and just people not firing all cylinders on a regular basis. Now, if you think of wellness from this perspective, we say, well, wellness is a physical, a mental, and an emotional compound. And with all of those, while those decreases in productivity can come from many factors, what we'll show you tonight is that wellness underpins the vast majority of them all, which we'll come to show you. So what I want you to do is have this mindset. I want you to think of productivity from the sake of sustainability, right? And think of it from a output per worker hour. Is that okay? Right, output per worker hour. And to increase productivity over time, we almost rely solely on increasing output per worker hour. Now, I want you to think of this analogy. I want you to pick yourself in a time when you're on the ball, right? All cylinders firing. We've all had this state at one point in time or another. You're on the ball, you're in the zone, and you're kicking ass, right? So you come to work, you're efficient, you're effective, you get your work done, and you go home. Now, contrast that with still you, or me, or anyone, that's for some reason not on the ball. You're one cylinder down. And this could be for any reason. I'm not even talking wellness or ill health related, right? It could be something is going on at home, your mind's not on the job, and every hour your efficiency and effectiveness isn't quite there. So what happens? You could either push harder, that's a taxing effect, or you work longer hours to get that work done. Now that has a taxing effect on the body and mind, and we only have set reserves that need to be replenished. So what happens the next day? You're one more cylinder down. So then you either push harder or you work longer to make up to get that work done, which means you're doing more and more hours for less and less effectiveness per worker hour. Does that make sense? So it's what we call burnout. Now, when we think of wellness from this perspective, that problem may not have stemmed from a wellness issue. However, it's going to end up as a wellness issue because this person, as so commonly happens, is going to be diminishing reserves. Yes? So, what we're presenting tonight is the no-nonsense stuff, as you heard. We don't think wellness is hard. We don't think it's confusing if you stick with the basics. And when I give you no-nonsense, sometimes people promote health messages because they think I should probably promote that message. I'll give you an example. Like, someone might say, what's it called? When it comes to coffee, you've got to decrease your coffee intake just because they think they should say that. Now, if someone's having a whole bunch of cups a day, maybe they need to. But if they're only having a reasonable amount, there's plenty of research that says there's fantastic benefits to coffee and plenty of research to prove it. The drinks that you have right now, some people say, oh, you're going to cut out your alcohol. So you don't have to cut out your alcohol. This is relative risk of mortality. And you can see a few drinks a day has a protective benefit, decreased risk, right? Now, if you're having 6 or 7 a day, we need to have that health promotion message. But there's nothing wrong with having a few drinks. So we cut through the crap and we just talk about what's relevant. Now, I mentioned about wellness for the sake of productivity and for the sake of sustainable productivity, right? Because I could push you hard today and get some good productivity from you. But what will you be like tomorrow and the next day? That's not sustainable. What they do is they track this is limitations in productivity. And I mentioned chronic disease before. They can associate health risk factors of chronic fatigue. And what they find is this, that there is an average 2.4% increase in productivity, which doesn't sound like much, but per worker, per risk factor eliminated. And when you think of most businesses that have 3/4 of their staff with multiple risk factors, can you see how that can add up pretty significantly? You can see so workplace wellness programs have a pretty significant decrease in sick leave, workers' comp, and decrease in disability management. What they do is they can get what they call a health diagnostic. We can give you a health and well-being score. Right now, imagine this. You get the top third of the health and wellbeing score, so that's the healthiest. Compare it to the bottom third of the health and wellbeing, so we cut out the middle ground, right? No grey area. And what they find when they compare the most well versus the unwell is this, that well employees take up to 9 times less sick leave. They're less likely to get injured at work. If they are injured, they make a cheaper and faster recovery, and they have better cognitive ability and perception of risk. So think of that from a safety perspective. There's a big association with increased engagement with wellness programs, and I know that's a buzzword, right? And I'm not usually into buzzwords, but when you're an employer, you give a shit about engagement. So globally, there are over 600 peer-reviewed studies that show that wellness programs have a positive return on investment. Yeah. What about areas like stress and mental health, which are quite big concerns? In fact, World Health Organization say by 2030 it'll be #1 as far as lost time, lost work time. So big problems. Now sometimes they're made out to be bigger than like a problem you can't go there. It's too it's too scary, right? And here's what the reality is with when it comes to stress and mental health. There is such a thing as a predisposition, right? Some people can have like a genetic predisposition to respond to stress in a more severe way. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the be-all and end-all. So what we find is that if you were to think of everyone here experiences stressors like events, circumstances, situations that present an element of stress that you can respond to in a stressful way. It's the response, which is to do with a perception. It's how you cope with that. And then we come to this, right? Imagine thinking of it, what's the opposite of depression and anxiety? You say to someone, what's the opposite of depression? They say, I don't know, like happiness or something. Think of the opposite spectrum being resilience. And resilience is our ability to withstand certain stressors, and think of them as polar opposites, okay? So, just an example, when they do studies with, and I'm using exercise just an example, something as simple as regular exercise, they test this for anxiety reduction effects, and it proves superior than stress management education, group therapy, stretching and yoga, meditation and relaxation, and cognitive behavioural therapy. And that doesn't mean those things aren't good, they're fantastic. That means something that's free and easy as regular activity beat that, and we'll see why, right? The only thing that beat it was drugs, and only marginally, and you don't have the side effects and you don't have the cost. Make sense? So, next is when I mentioned about the situational factors. This lady, her name is Petra Skeffington, she put it perfectly. She says that while someone may have a predisposition, which means they're more likely to have a more severe response to stresses, that's not the be-all and end-all. She says the quality of basic lifestyle factors which can strengthen the foundations of resilience and mental health, and things that endorse quality sleep, nutrition and physical activity, these things are important because it's not just the stressor, because everyone can have a stressor and relate to it differently or cope with it differently. It's the state that the person is in when they encounter that stress. Make sense? Physical activity. You go to your doctor and let's say you present a few health risks. What they do is they go to the top 5. You know what the top 5 health risks are? That's obesity, diabetes, smoking, blood pressure and cholesterol. And they're the typical things. And they might say, hey, look, let's go do some physical activity for the sake of decreasing these 5 risk factors, obesity or decreasing the severity of diabetes. But rarely do they say, go out and do physical activity for the sake of just being fitter. And what this study did is this one separated the association between if I do physical activity, will I lose weight, regardless of obesity or diabetes. This is what they found. You know how you can get, what's the term, fat fit, or like someone who's quite overweight, but they're actually pretty fit considering that. And likewise, you can have someone who's really thin and they can't walk up a flight of steps without losing a lung. You know what I mean? Like they're not cardio-respiratory fit. So they took low cardiorespiratory fitness is the risk factor, because high is good, and they compared it against all the others. What they call an attributable factor. It means the number of deaths, this is mortality, that would have been avoided if this risk factor was eliminated. Number 1 by far was low cardiorespiratory fitness, regardless of those things, regardless of weight. They compared this with BMI, with diabetes. All those things aside, cardiorespiratory fitness was the highest. Men are in black, women are in white there. So only men with high hypertension, blood pressure, was the only thing that came close, which means if we can increase our cardiorespiratory fitness, mortality-wise, that's better than giving up smoking. I'm not saying don't give up smoking, right? It goes to show you the power of something that we hear every day. Sticking to the basics and wellness isn't hard. What about, so that's the one. What about nutrition? Now, again, people might think weight loss or obesity or something. Nutrition affects emotional state, it affects mental state. It's a big thing. So the next thing you hear is that they'll say, oh, but it's really confusing. There's so much out there. And again, I say it's not confusing. It's not hard if you stick with the basics. And it's the public that demands these new sexy fads because they're like buying into stuff that's cool, I suppose. And sorry if I don't bring you the sexy message. It's just the basics. Now, what diet is this? The one that helps prevent weight gain, reduces risk of many cancers, heart disease, blood pressure, constipation, and mortality from almost any cause. And it's the one your grandma told you, eat your fruit and veg. I mean, that's the one. It's not, you know this. It's just that they almost need something else because that's a boring message. I need something sexy. And that's where the fads come out. So it's really not that hard. Why the workplace? The World Health Organization and the Australian government recognise that it's a pretty good setting as a vehicle for health promotion because people spend about a third of their time at work on average. And as John Lang, this is the Workplace Health Association of Australia, says that in the last 5 to 10 years, wellness programs in the corporations, in the workplace, has probably done more for health promotion than in communities and the government external to it. So it's a prime area to promote health. So we know it's good and it has good effect in the workplace. We know the workplace is a good avenue for it. What's the need for it? I'm not going to go much into this because you guys know it. Obesity is on the rise. That's diabetes is on the rise. All ages. This is cancers, 2011, 2015. They're all on the rise, except prostate. That's down. It's good. Better screening. Hey! Are we getting better at testing or something like that, man? And cardiovascular disease, cancer and diabetes. You look at the cost of diabetes and it's very significant. Here's the kicker. That the vast majority of these things are preventable, right? The vast majority of diabetes, the vast majority of heart attacks. It even says cancers. That's a big call. Who said that? I know it's a big range, but for many factors. And look, employees who are at risk can reduce risk factors with as little as 6 weeks in the wellness program. And that's cool to know. That's positive stuff. This study took a lot of heart attacks, 15,000 over 50 countries, and they said the entire global risk factors came down to 9 things, 9 risk factors. Of them, 7 were entirely lifestyle related. The other 2 were debatable because they have that predisposition factor, but what you do affects the expression of that predisposition. And this study showed that obesity is socially contagious. What that means, who you hang around has a very strong impact on your health and your well-being and obesity as far as this study is concerned. It says if your friend gets obese, you're much more likely to become, and if there are mutual friends, like a network, then it goes up astronomically, your chances. So another reason why in the workplace, a culture of wellness has a much stronger effect. Despite these 600 plus studies, in our industry, we have a challenge, right? Our challenge in health promotion, firstly, is that thing where if the basic messages are the best and people say, well, they're not cool or sexy enough, we've got to get around that. That's our first challenge. But the next comes down to perceptions of wellness, because it's kind of seen as a bit airy, a bit fairy, and a lot of programs, they'll do some one-off, tick-the-box, piecemeal kind of wellness program just for the sake of ticking a box of what's it called, corporate social responsibility. Yeah, I did my thing. We provided fruit at our breakfast or something, and there you go, my responsibility is done. And of course that doesn't get any results, so it's palmed off that industry is ineffective. And the other reason is that it's considered unconventional. Now here's a paradigm that I would love to see change. It's probably not going to change in my lifestyle, but I'd love to see it change. If you were to look up alternative health or alternative medicine, and it comes up as the same thing. And it says that conventional medicine, which is disease-based, like drugs and surgery, and there's a big need for that, right? Like, I'm not saying there's not. There is a place for it. That's considered first and foremost. Alternative health are all the things that will come under things like preventative, like wellness, like chiropractic, like naturopathy. And when the day comes that preventative or health is first, and the alternative health or alternative medicine, drugs and surgery, that'll be a good day. I know I'm dreaming, it's never going to happen, right? But that mentality is something we would like to foster. So nevertheless, despite those challenges, we try to foster this, what we call warrior's mindset, which just is a disciplined, consistent approach. And here are some things that you can take away to your businesses or your community as far as best practices for delivery in a wellness program. The first is senior leadership. If you can have people that lead from the senior levels, that has a very strong effect, because if they don't, it sends a message that it's not that important. The next is don't just tick boxes. So you're better off doing something thorough, otherwise again it sends the wrong message. Focus on cultural change. Even if it takes longer, a culture eats strategy for breakfast. Does that make sense? Shared responsibility, it's the employee and the company. That makes sense. Now, lay leaders. You can have champions within your company. They don't have to be doctors. They don't need to be nutritionists or physiologists or anything. They're just people that like promoting the benefits of the program, and it has a very positive impact. Engagement, certainly promotion is a big part, and you evaluate and make it sustainable for the long haul. Now, I won't go into our program too much, only because of time. I'd love to, if you go for questions, I'd love to stay back and I'll answer anyone's questions, but this is a bit about our program. This is kind of a snapshot of how we roll it out. Don't worry too much about that. But I will mention about our diagnostic. I don't know if you guys saw up the back, we've got a few laptops up there. That's an abbreviated version of our the online part of it. We do a health and wellbeing diagnostic. Part of it's in person, part of it's online. And it's an abbreviated. You couldn't do the whole thing or you'd be there for 30 minutes, and I know no one's going to do that with a drink. So, but for 3 or 4 minutes, at least you get an idea of what... So I welcome you to go and do that. It should be a good... and this is the kind of score you would get in the various aspects of wellness from a holistic perspective, and we know where to work on the most. So that's it. To summarise, as I said, there is a very strong link between the benefits a company can get from wellness programs in the workplace. We know it's not hard, it's not complicated if you just stick to the basics. And healthy equals happy, equals engaged, equals sustainably productive. And I hope that's something you can go and take to your community. Thanks.